I'm going to talk about three big trends that we can see accelerating thanks to what's going on in the economy. And the first one is one we're calling the Big Self, that stands in almost direct opposition, actually, to David Cameron's ideas about the big society. I mentioned earlier on that we had given our first quantitative panel an imaginary number of billions of pounds, and we'd asked them to cut government spending. And this is what they did. Right up top, the thing that people wanted to cut most, and they wanted to cut by some 41%, is international development, which interestingly is the only budget that was ring-fenced in the comprehensive spending review. After that, we became very short-termist. Climate change and energy, we became very keen on cutting culture, media and sports budgets by some 32.3%. Interesting in the run-up to the London Olympics. Where we did seem to have some kind of agreement was down here, though, with the smallest cuts, kind of 3.94%, 4.3%, coming in health, pensions, schools, other education. But what's interesting when you start splitting up those figures is that you see we've all become a nation of NIMBYs, because old people wanted to cut education, young people wanted to cut pensions, everyone in England wanted to cut any money going to Scotland. Everyone became very, very focused on their own definition of what was important. This trend is really characterised by this phrase, welcome to Fortress Me. People are turning in on themselves. People are starting to cocoon. The average UK home now contains more technology than it took to launch the first manned spaceflight, which is quite scary. And that's enabling people to use their homes in lots of different ways than they never have before. Why is this important? Well, this is a trend of consumer confidence all the way back to 1990, which Envision collects for us. You can see this is what happened in 2008. Everything got horrible. It started to rise a little bit again and then has fallen again down to the lowest it's been since 1992, which is kind of bad news. It's bad news because of this. This overlay graph is the average change in UK house prices. What you can see is back in 1990, whilst the graphs followed the same rough the graphs are almost contiguous. There's very, very little lag in terms of what people are thinking and a real effect on our economy. In our research, we found that people were really concerned about these following dimensions. Stagflation. Our economy's in trouble. Depending on which figures you believe, it either grew 1.7% last year or it shrank by 0.5%. Neither of those figures particularly healthy. And as well as that, the price of things is going up. VAT has increased, the cost of raw materials for food is going up. People are worried about interest rates. People are actually starting to worry about unemployment. 50,000 people in the NHS about to potentially lose their jobs. So it's really starting to cut home already. And service cuts. If you're lucky enough to live in Manchester, your rubbish is only going to get collected once every 2 weeks as of right now. Education suffering a double whammy. The people most able to take their children out of the public sector education and take pressure off it by paying for education will have less money to spend on it very, very shortly. And education has seen some quite severe cuts as well, so that's a kind of double whammy going on there, putting in question David Cameron's ideas about the big society. People's responses to this, then, are real kind of turning in. We've seen interest in things that are local, not national. We've definitely seen interest in things that are national, not international. We've seen people redefine what they're concerned about and finding ways to cut things out of their budgets, smooth the way they're paying them, and delay purchases, which has led to whole growth in the realms of entertainment. So it's no surprise then that, if you're Sky or Virgin, you should be fighting for share right now. What is it that you can give your audience that's going to be really, really important to them and make sure that you're part of their turning in on themselves? The trend can be defined in this single sentence: help me enjoy my space, with the emphasis on my, because people will define what they want that space to be very much on their own terms. And brands are starting to do really, really clever things. Love Film just ran an offer where if you're a Love Film subscriber, if you prepaid upfront for a year, you got a whopping 25% off your Love Film subscription. Now, I know that offer worked because after 3 days it was reduced to 15% very, very quickly. So I imagine there was a kind of absolute avalanche of people signing up. But that's great for Love Film because they've hooked those people for a whole 12 months. That means they don't have to worry about them attriting. And it's great for people as well who can save money on stuff that's going to be important for them in terms of swapping behaviour, so not going out to the cinema. Also, I mentioned local, a great big national, very successful charity, behaving and supporting local initiatives like this one, I think it's in Derby, actually showing people that donating to Cancer Research UK can have an effect on their immediate area, not just the nation. The second trend that we noticed is one that we're going to call irrational economics. This picture is the staircase up which you ascended to come into this room, and I think it shows really neatly the kind of contradictions that people are holding in their own heads, because we've got a very luxurious setting doing great work for charity. And look at this quote from research. We stopped going to visit the in-laws, but I couldn't imagine life without my organic vegetable delivery. Now, quite what this says about this person's individual relationship with their in-laws, I can only surmise. Can you imagine a better example of redefining the necessity? Who, 2, 3, 4, or even 5 years ago, would have imagined that a bunch of organic vegetables from Abel & Co. was more important than going to see your in-laws? Effectively, what we think is that everyone's going to have their own velvet rope. And it's going to be really, really important for you to be the brands that get over that velvet rope into the club that is what they think they need. I don't think people differentiate between wants and needs much more. I think everyone just decides they need stuff, and what they need is very pertinent and very personal to their own circumstances. And that's why even things like necessities like food can be divided and subdivided into a range of choices for people. I'm sure a lot of you are very, very familiar with the case study of the launch of Waitrose Essentials that saw Waitrose launch a range of well-priced food, and sales of them went up by 11% within the first 3 months. That's fantastic, especially if you consider that some of those foods had existed in the Waitrose portfolio already. They were simply repackaged, and in some cases the price of them went up, which is quite fascinating. But also around about the same time, Waitrose launched Seriously, which is its range of seriously tasty, seriously high calorie, seriously indulgent, everything. And what that does is it allows people to define what and when they're going to buy, what they're going to put luxury value on, and what they're going to put economy value on. As Apple advertising often says, everything has changed now. And if you were going to describe this trend in a single sentence, it's about letting me decide, again with the emphasis on me, let me decide what's important and necessary in my life. Examples of this, Barclaycard Freedom, a newly launched, or rather a year-old loyalty scheme on the Barclaycard platform. Interestingly, doesn't issue with points, issues you with freedom money, issues you with stuff in pounds and pence. Interestingly, doesn't send you coupons with use-by dates on them. Interestingly, isn't limited to participation by a small number of large retailers, but also is available on the high street, giving people choice as to how they save or spend their freedom currency. The National Theatre have just launched a programme called Young Patrons. Now, Young Patrons is a subscription service that allows you, from as little as £10 a month, to keep going to the theatre. And in fact, the more you go to the theatre, the more valuable the Young Patrons programme becomes to you. Clever of them, because what they're doing is they're generating a prospect pool for old patrons, and they are generating a prospect pool for legators. But what they're also doing is keeping people going to the theatre. One of those things that Paul said, highly discretionary expenditure, and really, really under threat potentially, but turning one-off events into a series of events that members can benefit from.